I have read so many light novels over the years, and I have got many favourites. However, I need to ask you guys for your opinion on some titles. Because over the years, while I've read many titles, I've also dropped or just left some titles to kind of rot. So, in this video, I'm going to talk about some titles that I really like the potential of, but never went back to them. And I'm going to ask you guys to help me. The first title we're going to talk about is Date Alive, and this is one that I feel like was incredibly popular a few years ago. However, I feel like once the light novel kind of got the initial buzz of an announcement, I didn't really see anybody actually talking about it. I'm assuming that this is one that most people kind of just had already read most of the content before it got an official release, and so there's very little buzz about the actual product itself. And when I read it, I quite enjoyed it. I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to pretend that it was one of the greatest pieces of literature I'd ever read for Volume 1, but it was pretty acceptable. And I'm always intrigued at seeing how good this one can actually be, because like I said, it's incredibly popular. And yeah, should I go back and try and read Date Alive? There was a lot of things I really did like. I liked the aspect of the main character having to date these girls, and from what I understand there is quite a lot of various waifu of the week kind of situations. But I don't know, there was something about it. I liked it, I enjoyed it, but it didn't kind of strike me as anything particularly amazing, at least in Volume 1. Should I go back, or should I just leave this one forever? Let me know in the comments. The next title we're going to talk about is Killing Slimes. Now this one is an absolutely comfy series, and I really liked it. An overworked office worker is ended up being reborn in another world. They decide to take the slow route, but to make some money they kill some slimes every day. Over the course of a few hundred years, they end up being insanely overpowered and have all kinds of people knocking at the door. Now this is a comfy series about the day-to-day life of this witch character, but they kind of start getting a family and whatnot as well. While it was incredibly relaxing, I just didn't feel like the pace was fast enough for me to keep dipping back to it. And before I knew it, there were about 10 volumes still for me to read. But I feel like as time has gone on, and because the likes of Bofuri and others are just not releasing fast enough, I've started wanting to come back to this one. It's incredibly comfy, so I'm just thinking, is it time for more comfortable? I think so. The next title is another one that I read Volume 1 of and I thought was pretty okay. It had a good introduction, but again, I just wasn't hooked enough to try it anymore. However, I have noticed in the comments section of my top 50 light novels of all time, people constantly praise this one. And when I look around, there is a huge dedication of a following. And that title is A Certain Magical Index. Now, I know you guys absolutely love this one, and I was quite surprised because, if I'm perfectly honest, while it was a good enough series, again, much like Volume 1 of Date Alive, it didn't really strike me as anything too out of the ordinary or too unique. I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of the stuff of a unlucky guy getting overpowered abilities in a modern day somewhat setting and pretty much having to fight angels or demons or monsters or whatever is one of, in my opinion, the most generic premises out there. Now, A Certain Magical Index did hook me from whatever I read. However, like I said, I'd read a few other titles, including Date Alive and High School DxD, which I feel had a very similar setup and, not necessarily premise, but a very similar hook. And because Date Alive, High School DxD and Index, I read them all at the same time, I ended up dropping all three. So yeah, I never really went back to it. Now I am aware that it is quite hard to find any of, at least some of the volumes. I know some of them are well out of print, and I'm not going to spend hundreds of pounds on a big tome to put on my shelf and never touch it. It's just not going to happen. I don't have the space. But like I said, this is one that a lot of people absolutely adore and constantly recommend. Let me know in the comments what sets this one out from other light novels. Again, another title that I thought was absolutely fantastic and really enjoyed the first two volumes, and it's one that I will always recommend people to try out if they want something very dark in their fantasy, and that is Torture Princess. Now, I'm going to be perfectly honest, this is a title that I specifically have chosen not to cover on the channel very often, simply because I feel like it's one that I can't really talk about without getting demonetized. But it's one that I always really liked. I read the first 2 or 3 volumes, and I actually bought volume 4 without ever reading it. I'm aware that it ended, and I kind of got the impression from pretty much everybody that the series wasn't worth keeping up with. While I enjoyed it, it is something that I do take on board when people say, oh, you know, it's not really that good by the end. But I'm not sure. What do you guys think? Is this one that is worth keeping up with? Or is one that, well, I should just leave, maybe get the first few volumes and then just try again? I don't know. But let me know. I've heard that this one ends pretty badly, or the last few volumes fall off, but that might just be 1 or 2 vocal minorities. What do you guys think? When we talk about series that I absolutely love, one of the ones I will always recommend for newcomers to light novels is 86. I absolutely adore volume 1 of 86. However, if I'm perfectly honest, after volume 1, when I read volumes 2, 3, 4 and 5, I didn't have the same feeling. Volumes 2 and 3 were, well, pretty good. However, they didn't feel exactly the same. It very much felt that this was a one and done series that was extended far beyond it should have been. And volume 4 and volume 5 didn't really kind of push me back into it, sadly enough. Now, I do have volume 6 and volume 7 all ready to be read. However, I'm blatantly aware that I'm probably going to have to reread the first 5 volumes to kind of get back into the spirit. While I can remember most of this one, after that, it kind of started getting a little bit forgettable. So, I want to know from you guys, is it worth keeping up with? This is another one where I feel like a lot of people kind of say it's not really worth keeping up with. The first volume is the best one, even volumes 2 and 3 is good, but as the series goes on, it starts getting less and less great. It doesn't help for the fact that it was very hard to find some of the volumes of this. I'm kind of thinking that maybe I might sell up volumes 2 to 6 and then just keep this one and then buy the rest digitally. I don't know. It's still quite hard to find some of these, so I'm not like in a huge rush to get them, but maybe I should. What do you guys think? The next one is a title that I read at the beginning of this year and I quite enjoyed it. However, it didn't really stand out in the whole scheme of things. I read volumes 1 and 2, enjoyed what I got, but never really felt that I needed to go back to it. And that title is Alia Sometimes Hides Her Feelings in Russian. Now, when I see a lot of people recommending titles, this one nearly always appears. It's always a recommendation for those who like titles such as The Angel Next Door Spoils Me Rotten. And I agree with that. If you like Angel Next Door, you're gonna like Alia. However, I feel like if you've got one and don't necessarily need too much cute fluffy romance in your hands, you probably don't need the other. So I'm going to ask you guys, does this one become exceptional? Because while I liked it, I did feel like the main girl was always a damsel in distress, and the main guy, while he was a little bit more interesting than, say, a few other light novel protagonists who were kind of like, they're just basically a loser, I did feel like he was a good protagonist. But there was something about her where he was constantly coming to her in her time of need, and there wasn't much vice versa. I kind of felt that was a very one-sided one and started to feel a little bit more wish fulfillment. But I keep seeing this one hyped up. So, do I make the splurge and buy volume 3 and 4? They are quite cheap at the moment, so maybe it's worth my time. For those who have actually extended beyond volumes 2, let me know. Is this one worth checking out? Let me know. The next one is one where I read the first 3 volumes and then it just became so difficult to find any more of. And with it being 3-in-1 volumes, I find it being a big commitment for a title that is just going to end up sitting on my shelf. But I'm kind of thinking I want to go back to this one, and that title is The Slayers. Now, I went out and bought volumes 1 to 3, or well, this 3 and 1, from G Novel Club as soon as it came out. However, I never actually saw volumes 2 or 3 of the collector's editions, and they seem to be quite expensive to buy. Now, one of the things I do find is when I pick up some of these 3 and 1 editions is that I need to read all 3 of them, and I do feel like it is quite a task to get through all 3 of the volumes. But that just might be me. I mean, I do have stuff like Full Metal Panic, Quest of the Stars and Banner of the Stars sitting on my shelf all waiting to be read. Can I justify buying another 3 and 1? I mean, at the end of the day, it does look absolutely exceptional, and I really do like the characters and the unique fun world. But I don't know. Have you guys read all of it? Is it worth keeping up with it? Let me know. One of my biggest problems with some series is that it's pretty clear that they're just not going to end anytime soon. Infinite Dendrograms one. However, I absolutely adore that series. But there was another series that really got me into light novels that I did eventually drop. And the reason being was because, well, I feel it's a better binge. But I also feel like it's one that it doesn't seem to have a clear end goal in sight. It feels like it could go on for another 20 years because the author just likes adding things, and that's perfectly fine. But for me, ReZero was one that I kind of got to a certain point and I was just like, I like this, but I also don't know if this is ever going to end. Are we ever going to get a good payoff for everything that's happening? Now, I believe many, many years down the line we will get a good payoff, but at this point, it's looking pretty apparent that this is going to end up being 40 to 50 volumes, if not more. And I had to drop it around volume 18 once I realised that. Now, I'm perfectly aware that we have now seen the release of volume 23 in English, so I am quite a few volumes behind. So I'm kind of thinking, do I start looking at buying this one digitally? Do I sell up and sell all my physical editions and start buying it digitally? Because at the end of the day, I can dip in and out. But on the other hand, ReZero is one that is a fantastic binge. I do feel like if I kind of do want to read it, I'm going to get to the end of this particular arc. At least trying to do that. It's a difficult one because it is quite an expensive thing, and I think that it's going to be quite expensive to keep buying volumes of this if it's never going to have a payoff, or if I get to a point where I'm going to be far too old to ever finish it off. I mean, at the end of the day, in a few years' time, things are going to be completely different, and I'm probably not going to get a chance to be able to read the amount of light novels I am reading now. And at the end of the day, if light novels such as ReZero are just never going to end, well, is it worth my time going back? Even if it is really, really good. The next title is, well, it's one that I've always wanted. The anime is a classic in my opinion, and it's one that I do enjoy going back from time to time. However, I never actually got the light novels, and unfortunately these light novels are now in a situation where they're quite hard to find, at least some of them. But because of the way they've been released, I kind of want to get them physically rather than digitally. And that title is Bakugo. Now, you guys are probably aware of this anime series. It is an absolutely huge, huge classic in my eyes. And when Yen Press released them, they released them in hardback. Now, I initially didn't buy them because I also like this writer's other works, Durarara. And when I picked up that volume 1 of Durarara, I didn't really care for it. It didn't really feel the same as what it was on the screen. Now, this was one of my very first light novels, and I wasn't in the same position as I am now, where I just read so many light novels it doesn't even faze us. I'm even doing a video where I rank all of my light novels, and I'm not even including that one because I don't think it's very fair to even include it because, well, I didn't really give it a fair shot. Because they were all released in hardback, Yen Press over the years has made Bakugo collecting very difficult, with some of the volumes getting ridiculous prices. But because it's a hardback, I kind of want to own that. I kind of want to have that collection of hardbacks on my shelf. But it's a strange one, because while the anime is absolutely massive, I don't hear anybody, and I mean anybody, I don't see anybody even talking about Bakugo as a light novel. So I'm going to ask you guys, is it worth buying, or should I just buy the digital version and hope maybe someday Yen Press might re-release it physically? It's a weird one to be in, because I really want to see more of what we got, because the anime was fantastic, and I mean, it's been what, nearly 20 years? We're never going to see more of it. So I kind of want to see more of Bakugo, but I'm also kind of aware, do I get it digitally or physically, or is it even worth my time? I think that's the big one. I think, is it worth my time buying it, because I don't know anybody who's actually read it. So if you read it, let me know. I promised myself every year I'm going to read it, and I did have full intention of reading this entire series, because whenever I do my top 10 list, it's always in the top 10, and it's always fairly high up. But I've only read the first 2 volumes, and that title is Spice and Wolf. Now, a few months ago I went out and bought all of Wolf and Parchment, because while I was aware it was a sequel, I kind of was like, well, I can get volume 1 to 5. It was dirt cheap, and I was just like, you know what, I'll get them all and binge them. I started reading them, however, I was painfully aware that, well, you kind of need to finish, or at least get to a certain point in Spice and Wolf to make it all the better. But I just don't have time. And this isn't a question of me asking, is it worth me going back to this one? I know it's worth it. It's that good. It is one of the best series I have read. But I need to start deciding, do I focus on this one, or do I focus on all of the other little light novels that I've got? I've caught up on stuff like Overlord, Infinite Dendrogram, Konosuba and Monster Girl Doctor are both finished. So I kind of feel like I need a big series. And I'm starting to wonder, is Spice and Wolf that one that I need? And I think it might be. I mean, I know a lot of people will shout in the comments, Mushoku Tensei, why aren't you reading Mushoku Tensei? Mushoku Tensei, I made my bed with it. I was quite happy with seeing, you know what, I don't really like this main character, and I'm not really invested enough to kind of see if he becomes a better person. I know from what everybody screams at me, he does become a better person. But I kind of want to look at other great titles that are a little bit less loved. And Spice and Wolf, it's always been a favourite of mine. So is it time that I go back and read it all? I think maybe it is. Maybe I just need to buy all of the volumes. I mean, it is still quite a commitment. I mean, there's 20 volumes I'm missing. But maybe every other chapter I'll go and read this between other series. Maybe.